So I saw the guys over at Kinda Funny doing a like 10 years out prediction where, they got together, did a podcast, and they were predicting what gaming would look like in 2035. And I was like, damn, I really like this idea a lot. This sort of time capsule, which they did in the past in 2015, kind of, look back on some of that. I was like, I like that. I like having something, submitted, something that is, you'll be able to look back on it in 10 years' time and see how right you were, and more likely than not, how wrong you were in a lot of instances. So let's predict the next 10 years of gaming. So I made a lot of cuts to my list here. I have a ton of predictions jotted down that we're going to go over, and I cut even more of them because I think this is going to be a long ass video as is, so I apologize for that. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into it, and like the video if you like the video. So let's start off with an easy one, a quick one. VR will still be pretty much irrelevant in 2035. I know this isn't shocking. People were saying this 10 years ago, I believe. Even kind of funny. I went back and watched a little bit of their 2015 predictions for 2025, and if I'm not mistaken, they were saying there that VR would be irrelevant in 2025. And irrelevant is such a strong term, but by and large, it hasn't, people were talking about it being the next thing in gaming. And I guess that's what I'm saying. It's just not going to be that. I think it'll always be a very niche thing if it even continues to exist at all in the way it's currently constructed. I feel like it might continue. It might still be around in some capacity just because it's like this new shiny object that developers and these different companies can get investors on board with the infinite growth. Who knows what this thing could grow into, and it could maybe still stick around in some capacity like that. I do think augmented reality will become a much more prominent thing in the future, but I don't think it's really going to have much to do with gaming. I don't think people really want to play games. Like, by and large, I know there's a few million VR owners out there, but by and large, I don't think people want to play games with something strapped to their head. I think people just want to sit down with a controller in their hands the same way they've been playing games for 50 years. Now let's get into one that's a little bit spicier. This is something I see all the time, and I just disagree. And I mean, I'll try to lay out my reasoning as best as possible, and let me know in the comments if you think I'm incorrect, and give me sort of your counter arguments, because I am curious what people see in this. I don't think cloud gaming is ever going to take off either. I think that's one of those other, shiny objects, the carrot that you can dangle in front of investors of, here's this next infinite growth possibility in the gaming space. And I don't think it's ever gonna be that. The argument of, well, people are gonna have lightning quick internet in 10 years, so you won't have to download your games anymore. But it's like, wouldn't that same scenario just lead to people being like, oh, cool, my internet is so good that it only takes me 2 minutes to download this 200 gigabyte game? I don't understand the logic. It's like, would you rather play your Fortnites and your Call of Duties and your NBA 2Ks without a console or without a PC and have, a little bit of latency issues here and there in these ultra competitive games that every frame matters to the highest degree, and you can't have any sort of lag, any drop, any sort of, like, you have to be playing the most optimal experience for all of those big games. All of the biggest games in the world. Like, sure, you could play your PS2 games and your PS1 games, but like, that's not the games people are playing. You know what I mean? So, hey, if it can get to a point where you're running Fortnite, Call of Duty, NBA 2K, all that, without any sort of lag whatsoever, then maybe cloud gaming could take off. But I still have a hard time understanding if internet speeds get that quick to where that's a possibility, to where that's a reality, then wouldn't you just download the game really quickly? I don't know. Once again, there might be something that's going way over my head. I'm not claiming to be Nostradamus of the game space, but I don't believe in the cloud thing as much as most people. I guess the only scenario I could see for cloud taking off is if it's just so stupidly cheap. But then again, it's the counter to that in my head is, who is the company that takes that plunge? Is it Microsoft again? Are they going to be the loss leader again for another decade in gaming? Maybe Google? Could Google get back into the space with a cloud-based subscription service, and then they have to go out and strike deals with damn near every television manufacturer in the world to get this app or whatever into every home nationwide? But even then, I get confused, because it's like, so what's the strategy going to be? To make it very, 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 very cheap to where you don't have to buy your games. Because I think if people are going to buy their games, they're going to want to play it on a console, on a PC, where they have the optimal experience. So it's like, okay, well, if you don't have to buy your games and you go the subscription service route and you just make cloud so accessible, how is Google going to do that? Are they going to contract, head over to Microsoft headquarters and be like, hey, we'll pay you $25 billion for access to all your first-party games on this cloud-based service? It's like, I don't know. I think Microsoft is in the best position currently if this plan does take place and this cloud future is inevitable, like a lot of people suggest it is, because they already have Game Pass. They're the biggest publisher in the world. So maybe, but I don't know. I have such a hard time seeing it in the next, listen, maybe 50 years from now, 30 years from now. Sure. 10, I don't see it. And I know I'm about to sound like an old man once again here, but to counter that, I think in terms of cloud being irrelevant, VR being irrelevant, I think what will still be relevant in 2035 is console gaming and PC gaming. Call that a hot take. I think that should be somewhat obvious for anyone who's been paying attention for the last over 10 years at this point. People have been predicting the downfall of console gaming, and then Switch comes out and sells 100 million units, and PS4 comes out and sells 100 million units, and PS5's on track to sell 100 million units, and it's, PlayStation is more profitable in this generation. They've accumulated more revenue in this generation than all previous PlayStation generations combined, and it's still, you have people out there prognosticating it's the end of console gaming. It's not. It won't be. I mean, listen, console gaming will probably evolve greatly. I'm not saying that won't be the case, and I think that there is a future where console gaming does become this console PC hybrid thing, to where you can pretty much get a plug and play style PC device in your living room very simply, very easily. And yeah, I think that could be a huge growth opportunity for gaming, but you'll still be playing your PlayStation 6 and your Nintendo Switch 3, and they'll be doing just fine. And I actually think that with the PlayStation 6, I think PS6 is going to be a banger of a console. I think that PS5 was such a disaster in terms of mismanagement from a first party standpoint. And if you look at that, PS3 really struggled out the gate, got stronger towards the end of the generation, and then PS4 completely fucking crushed it. And then PS5, a little bit of the same, stumbling blocks out the gate. Hopefully it'll end strong and then lead into a really good generation for the next generation. Switch, I think, will be a little bit less in terms of sales performance compared to Switch 1, but I think that overall, the Nintendo and PlayStation will continue to be healthy for a long time. Xbox, I don't know. Once again, I think Xbox, they're the biggest publisher in the world. They're probably the best publisher in the world at this point. I think, though, they are the one company who is always looking to the future too quickly. But I think there is a small chance that their next move with this next console, as they're going to be the first company that seems to listen, you can't necessarily believe anything that Xbox leadership says at this point. Don't expect every game to come over to PlayStation, and then we bought Bethesda for great Xbox exclusive games, and we got a handheld in development, like all these things consecutively. fall, these blocks just keep falling, lie after lie after lie. And then so you do kind of start thinking, oh, well, shit, the plans for the handheld kind of fell through. Are plans for the next gen console beginning to fall as well? It's obvious they don't seem to have that passion for the hardware space, especially as they are becoming the biggest publisher in the world and they're putting their games everywhere. Historically, when you start putting your games everywhere, that means you're typically going to get out of the console market, but they're once again in a really weird position where they could be first to market with that PC console hybrid. And so, yes, exclusives seem to be done for them. But could that be the exclusive feature where this is the only place at that time, if they're first to, if they're the first one to create that PC console hybrid experience, hey, this is where you're going to play, your Steam library and all of that in just a simple plug and play device in your living room. And if they're the first one there, is that enough of a selling point, or enough of a selling point to get people in the door? And for that to be what kind of revitalizes or gives Xbox a kick in the ass to really get more invested in the console ecosystem again, in actually developing hardware, in actually sticking with that for the long term. I don't know. It would all depend on if that is a selling point for, tens of millions of people, potentially hundreds of millions of people. And I think it could be, but I still do. Listen, I have an old ass man mindset about a lot of things, and this is one area I definitely have an old ass man mindset. I have a hard time believing that any hardware is going to sell without exclusive software. I've just never seen it before, and so maybe I'll be proven wrong. I hope I'm proven wrong. I think the console ecosystem is a much healthier space when there is competition, and yeah, so I hope that it works, but I have my skepticism. I think that there's a very strong likelihood that by 2035, the only players in the console race are PlayStation and Nintendo, and maybe Steam with a Steam machine. But even then, it would be like, okay, here's your Steam machine and you can only play Half-Life 3 here. Here's your Steam machine and you can only play Left 4 Dead 3 here. Portal 3 here, etc., etc. Deadlock, which you wouldn't do that for a live service style thing, but yeah. I think that there's like almost an equally 50-50 shot that Xbox takes off with the next gen console being the first to create that console PC hybrid, and then they just become, a dominant force in the console market again. And I think there's also an equal shot that they're completely out of the console space by 2035. Let's head on into one that I think probably will be the most unpopular opinion of this list. I think iPhones will dominate handheld gaming, or I should say iPhone, and other than Switch, I think iPhones will dominate handheld gaming. And I'm not even talking, I'm talking about the core gaming market. By 2035, I think the iPhone will be a dominant handheld device in the core gaming market by 2035. I think as you're seeing more of these emulation apps available on iPhone, and it's starting to open up more and more on iPhone, or on Apple devices. And I think that the next step would be just some way, if you could access a Steam library, or if on your iPhone there was an app where every game that was compatible with your iPhone, you could just buy straight from a store, like straight from an app store on your phone. And then I think the next step would be creating some sort of backbone device that was really cheap. Or maybe some SKU that just came with the phone. And, a nice sort of accessory that connects to your phone, that attaches to your phone, that pretty much creates a handheld gaming device for, let's just say the accessory's $30, $40, something really, really cheap, but really high quality. Because, billions of people have these phones just sitting in their pockets, And I know that there's been attempts like you've seen with Resident Evil 4. The remake didn't sell all that well when it came to iPhones. But I think you got to start marketing that a little bit better. You need to see like commercials and billboards where people are playing their games on an iPhone, and make that abundantly clear that like the same experience you get on a Steam Deck, the same experience you get on a Switch 2. Like, games will play, because, I mean, iPhones are incredibly fucking powerful. You know what I mean? And you can get iPhones with 1 terabyte of storage. My iPhone has 1 terabyte of storage because I'm recording this into an iPhone. I create so much content through my iPhone, I got to have a ton of storage. So, like, if that becomes cheaper, more affordable to buy, a 1 terabyte, and it's already not, gruelingly expensive with your monthly plan. And I don't know, I just think there's a real an opportunity there. Like, if I'm looking at the actual infinite growth opportunities in the gaming space that investors are so, starry-eyed over, that's the one spot that it actually makes sense. But you got to market it in the same way that a Steam Deck is marketed, because it's not the thing where people don't have real interest. Like, there's a very, very small market. There's a very small percentage of people who have actual interest in a Steam Deck, a ROG Ally, whatever the case may be. Like, 5 million people or whatever have bought a ROG Ally and a Steam Deck and all that stuff combined. But see, that's not the issue. Like, selling it isn't going to be the issue with an iPhone, because we already all have them. So if you can just make it abundantly clear to the, whatever core gaming market, let's say, 300, 4 million, whatever, if you can make it abundantly clear to that 300 or 400 million people who already have an iPhone in their pocket that they do not have to go out and buy a Steam Deck for $800, and that they can play all the same games with the exact same performance and the exact same, I don't know. I think that's an interesting, avenue for Apple to try to really tackle, but you got to market it like a motherfucker. But I don't think PlayStation is going to have much success whatsoever in the like mainstream success in the handheld gaming space. I don't think Xbox with their handheld is going to have much success. Like, once again, they'll sell millions of these things, but they're not going to cross into that threshold of Switch territory, 100+ million of these things sold. I don't think either company is going to do that, because I don't think either company is going to be creating dedicated software for the, for their handheld devices. So I do think that really the only avenue I see for handheld gaming for there to be another, somewhat competitor to the Switch, and I'm not even saying on that level, but I really think the iPhone is the only other handheld gaming device that can reach mainstream appeal. And of course it already is more mainstream than any fucking gaming device out there. It is your Candy Crush runner. That's where your parents and grandparents play games, and where your nieces and nephews play games when they're really young. But there's that age range gap from, I don't know, 13 to, let's say, 45, where it seems that they're having a little bit of trouble. The mobile market is having a little bit of trouble finding that core gaming audience. But I think there is real growth opportunities there. And one of the only real carrots that I think actually makes any tangible sense to dangle in front of investors. All right, but now let's get into some fun shit. Let's stop saying the word market and share and percentage and all these dumbass buzzwords, and let's talk about some real video games. I don't think I have anything else on here that's video game business. Well, I do have one more thing, but I don't know. We'll talk about that in a second. So next up, I think Rockstar will not have any franchises out, any new games inside of previously existing franchises out by 2035. But I think they will have a new IP, like core Rockstar, Rockstar North, or I don't even remember what the hell they call the studios now, but their core teams, like a Red Dead 2 team, will be working on a new IP that releases by 2035, like an agent style game. I'm not saying they're going to go back and revive Agent or anything like that, but I think that we see a new IP from Rockstar, which would be the first time, if I'm not mistaken, since the PS2 era, like core Rockstar talent working on a new IP. I could be wrong on that. There might have been something in the PS3 that I'm not remembering, but I mean, you had your Max Payne, and you had which I know LA Noire wasn't core Rockstar talent, but you know Red Dead 1 and then GTA 4 and GTA 5, but these are known IP, these are franchises. So this would be, I think, oh, they had the table tennis. That's right. They had the fucking table tennis game. Um, okay, so let's sure we'll allow table tennis to be included in here. It'll be the last new IP from core Rockstar talent since table tennis, which I think came out in like 2009 or something, if I'm not mistaken. Everybody is going to have their thing that they want Rockstar to do. I lean sci-fi. I've always wanted to see, and because you see with Starfield, it's like, yeah, that's cool, but there's definitely limitations there. There's a lot of limitations there that Rockstar wouldn't have to, restrain themselves with, and I don't know. That's kind of the area for me. Like, let's see these motherfuckers tackle sci-fi. I know a lot of people go medieval, like a medieval open world style Rockstar game. I think that in some way KCD2 kind of scratches that itch for me. Sci-fi is really my angle. Where it's like, yes. Or you don't necessarily want to go Blade Runner futuristic because Cyberpunk kind of has that lockdown. Sci-fi is completely fucking open. Completely open. And as much as I enjoyed Star Wars Outlaws, so many times while playing that, I'm like, I wish this speeder bike controlled a little bit better. I wish this spaceship controlled a little bit better. You know, just these little, I wish these characters had a little bit more of a lifelike quality to them. I wish the animation was a little bit stronger. And yeah, I don't know, man. I would just like to see Rockstar tackle a sci-fi game. So I'm not throwing that in the prediction per se, but I am saying lock it in prediction. We're not going to get an RDR3. We're not going to get a GTA 7. We're not going to get a Bully 2 by 2035, but we will get a brand new IP from core Rockstar talent. And not like Rockstar talent who went off and started their own new thing like Build a Rocket Boy, or, you know, the new project that the Hausers, or I believe Dan Hauser, is working on, but inside of Rockstar, like Rockstar fucking North presents blank new IP, Agent, whatever it's going to be. All right, now let's do one more bummer prediction, and I think we're in the clear after this. Everything from this point on is fairly positive, at least. I think Ubisoft does end up getting fully acquired by Tencent. And I think at that point, Tencent will inevitably make huge cuts. This is not something I want to happen. We're predicting 10 years in the future. This is just something I think will happen. I think we'll see significant layoffs to thousands and thousands of employees at Ubisoft. And then Tencent will just have full control over Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Splinter Cell, Ghost Recon, Beyond Good and Evil, on and on and on. I obviously do not want this to happen, but this just seems so inevitable to me. This is one of those predictions that's like, it's just kind of staring at you. It's slapping you in the face. It's blatantly obvious, at least in my opinion, that this is kind of the inevitable road that Ubisoft is going to go down. Unfortunately, once again, fucking very unfortunate. It's the same thing with like NetEase. When they got in business, they bought up a lot of American companies, and then when they found out how expensive game development was in America, a lot of those companies started folding. And it's just, and once again, Ubisoft isn't based out of America, although they do have studios in America. But this one isn't even so much about location as much as it is about just volume. They employ like 10,000 people at Ubisoft. And lately, they've been lucky to get a game or two out each year. And, you know, they have the Ghost Recon games that are ongoing and generating revenue for them, but not to the scale of 10,000 people, you know? So, I don't know. I feel like this is a pretty obvious inevitability, unfortunately. And yeah, so last bummer thing, and let's get on to some more positive shit here. Well, I guess I promise this next thing is going to sound negative, but it's not. So I think physical media sales for gaming will bottom out around 15%. So I think right now they're saying it's around 20%, 80% digital, 20% physical. Got to keep in mind a lot of that is accounting for microtransactions and DLC and a lot. This isn't all just base game purchasing, but regardless, I think it bottoms out around 15%. And I think what we end up seeing is a lot of smaller publishers who find great success catering to this market. Like, I could see limited run games kind of transitioning into this role of AAA physical publishing only, where they're publishing the physical copies for all of Microsoft's games or all of Ubisoft's games or all of the, these companies who release pretty horrible physical editions and don't seem to have much care for that side of the market. I could see LRG just taking over that wing entirely for some of those companies. And then you have like your Lost in Cults who just popped up onto the scene. And obviously you have your IM 8 bits and your special reserve games. And you got a lot of these smaller, more niche markets catering to smaller, more niche games. And I think those will continue to grow, and you'll have some of these markets that kind of grow into AA publishing, and then there'll be the III indie publishing. And like, I think that this will become a much more lucrative and much bigger business as more of the traditional publishing for physical releases kind of fade out. It'll make more room for these boutique offerings, but these boutique offerings are typically going to publish better products for the people who, like consuming physical media. I think detachable disk drives will exist for the PS6. I think full physical support will exist for Switch 2 and Switch 3, and then probably going on to Switch 4, 5, 6, whatever. And I think most major publishers will still release a physical variant of their product. But I do think a lot of them will stop doing day one releases, and they'll kind of do the Cyberpunk thing where they'll patch up the game, they'll patch everything up and then do a complete version later down the line, like a Game of the Year edition or whatever the case may be. But I think this could actually be a win for physical media fans and for the publishers. Publishers are they're going to get a lot of people on the FOMO buys. They're going to get a lot of people who double dip, buy in day one, and then pick up the physical later. But I also think you're going to see this strange occurrence where a lot of people are waiting to buy games and skipping out on the day one digital version. And you'll see a lot of people like kind of splitting a lot of people be talking about the best games of the year in 2034, but they're playing 2033 games. And like for me, that happened with Alan Wake 2, where it was one of the best games of 2023, but I didn't play it until 2024 when it got a physical. I think that's going to become a very common thing for like a lot of games, not just one or two. And that's unfortunate, kind of, right? Like what would you prefer? Botched physical releases on day one, or wait a year and get the complete game on disc and not have all the DRM and all the horse shit. Now, to be fair, I'm kind of even backtracking in real time as I'm thinking about this, because the next consoles will all be DRM dependent. Because even with the PS5 Pro, you have to have an initial boot up to the internet to even get the console to function. So it is DRM dependent just inherently. So it's like at that point, do we really even give a fuck that we're buying physical media that is or isn't DRM dependent? Because like if our core way of playing those games is so reliant on DRM, then what's inside of the box really doesn't fucking matter at that point. Regardless of all that shit, I think physical media is going to be fine. This is a really long-winded way of getting to the point. Dude, They're still printing vinyl. They're still printing CDs. They're saying cassettes are making a comeback. Listen, this is a multi-billion-dollar market. I was watching Christopher Dring's show, the Game Business Show, and a executive over there at CDPR came on and was talking about how well their physical release sold because they were catering directly to a market who wanted this very specific thing out of their product, and they gave them that very specific thing with their product. So tons of people bought it because it's exactly what that market is looking for. And it's the same thing I said earlier. Sure, yes, it is a very niche market. I can't dispute that. I wish I could. It's indisputable. It's a niche market. But you've already made the game. You've already released the game digitally. You're already making patches to the game. And then when all of that is finished and you can print a disc version of it and then sell it to this niche market who, yes, they're niche, but okay, if there's this total pie, if we accumulate to, I don't know, 15 million, 20 million, yeah, I don't know the exact, this is all off the top of the dome. It's probably even more than that, but let's just say 15, 20 million. Physical media prefers that you like hardcore physical media fans out there. Like, I think that's a pretty worthwhile market to launch your game inside of. And if you can sell an extra 3-4 million copies, something like that, I think that's probably worth it. I mean, and listen, I even think that some of that data is skewed by the publishers who want to pursue this all digital future, because when you look at like Astro sales and it's like 60-40, 60% digital and then 40% physical, and it's a game that came out in 2024. So, okay. Interesting that no one's making a big deal about this data. So yeah, anyway, long-winded point is you'll still be able to play your physical games in 2035. You'll be playing them on a detachable disc drive. I don't doubt that, but you will still be able to play physical games in 2035. All right, next up, I think we're going to see a lot of Claire clones. I think we're going to see a lot of Claire Obscure Expedition 33, horrible name. I think we're going to see a lot of clones of that game by 2035. I think this might become like the dominant, JRPG. I don't even know. It's so, the terminology's so shit, but whatever this is, I know it's not a Japanese role-playing game, but a Japanese-inspired role-playing game. I think you will see a lot of JRPG or JRPG adjacent games have a very, very similar mechanical approach to combat that 33 has. I think that this is probably the most influential game that will release in the current decade that we're living in, and it will go on to be, the most influential game of the 2030s, or one of the most influential games of the 2030s. Just in the sense of, like, meaning you will see so many games throughout the 2030s that were undeniably influenced by Claire Obscure after it came out, and then they went and aped or iterated on some of those mechanics. You'll see a lot of that mechanical influence in tons and tons and tons of JRPGs in the 2030s. I'm not saying that, I'm sure there will be another game that releases in the 2030s that'll go on to be more influential in the 2040s, but you get what I'm saying. And I guess just to parlay right on top of that, I think you will absolutely see a mainline Final Fantasy game with this style of combat. I don't know, probably not Final Fantasy 9. I assume that remake is already in development. Probably not Final Fantasy 17. I would assume that's in development as well. I don't know. But I definitely think by 2035, there is a Final Fantasy game that has very, very, very similar combat styles to Claire Expedition 33. And I think that just this market in general, you're going to be dodging the shit out of attacks, parrying the shit out of attacks on defense, and active offense has been a thing for a while in JRPGs, but that will be iterated on and much improved year by year. And yeah, I think that game is going to have a lasting impact on this industry, and that team should be really, really fucking proud of themselves. All right, so next up, this is one I think someone is going to crack the code on melee hand-to-hand combat. Real-time action, melee, in your face, no swords, no guns, just put your dukes up and let's go. We really have been locked in for shit, man, since 2008 when Arkham came out, of like, this is the way to do melee hand-to-hand combat. You know, flow-based, counter-based, and then really if you want to extrapolate further from Demon Souls in 2009, 2010, whenever that came out, that became like the other predominant third-person style of action combat, where now the Souls influence has definitely overtaken the Arkham influence, but those are still, to this day, that's the mold for third-person, action combat. For most games where you're playing in the third-person perspective and not using a gun, that is the mold. And there's just such a... I think this is the obvious next big breakthrough in gaming in terms of gaming mechanics, because fighting just feels so unnatural in games. Like, the fact that you never take anybody down in games is fucking crazy. And the fact that there's not real systems involved with, grabbing someone's leg and trying to sweep their back foot. And like, every real world fight ends on the ground. But almost 0% of video game fights end on the ground. You know what I mean? And it might be a thing where you can just press a button and immediately take someone down. It's like, yeah, we get that in games. But, the push and pull, I don't necessarily even know how it's going to work. And the more I think about it, the more I understand why this hasn't worked, because it's going to be fucking complex as hell to create. But it just, when I'm thinking of hand-to-hand combat, like something like Sifu, that level of mechanical depth and complexity, but trying to figure out how to make that accessible, to make that appeal to a broader audience. And maybe it's more of an RPG thing, like it'll be something that happens in RPGs more, where you like pick certain backgrounds for your character, for your fighting style. But it's like, if you look at Olympic level wrestlers and just, collegiate fucking All-Americans, and then you look at MMA, you look at the UFC, you look wherever, they're all the champions. You go one by one, division by division. It's all, all-American wrestlers and Olympian wrestlers. Like, if you can take someone's back, if you can take someone to the ground and then just beat their head in, the fight is over. It doesn't matter if you got Kickboxer Joe out there throwing spinning back kicks and doing all this fancy shit. If that dude grabs your leg and drops you on your head, you're toast. And I don't know, I feel like we gotta see more lifelike, real, and not real to the point where it's boring and overly simulated, but like, how do you merge something that feels lifelike with hand-to-hand combat and make it fun in game form? I think, listen, some of the most brilliant people in the fucking world are developing games right now, and I have to imagine someone out there is trying to crack this code. Because we've been locked into we've been locked into a formula for a long time with third-person melee-based games, and I think someone is going to crack that code by 2035. All right, so next up, I think we will get an NFL 2K30, or a 2K30 something. I'm not saying it's going to be specifically NFL 2K30, but sometime before 2035, we will get an NFL 2K30 something. And how I suspect this will happen is that EA will end up reviving their college basketball series. And I think that, I'm not saying it's going to blow up to college football 2025 levels, but I think it will provide enough competition in the basketball space that, NBA 2K has not had any competition in over a decade. And I think that'll get under that'll ruffle some feathers over there at 2K and Take-Two. And I wouldn't be surprised if old Strauss Zelnick picks up the phone and then contacts a Roger Goodell, or I assume that he can get in touch with Roger Goodell pretty easily. And I don't know, maybe those competitive juices at that point begin to flow, and it's like we're striking a deal. We're making this happen. We're coming back with an NFL 2K video game. Because you got to keep in mind, NFL 2K5 was absolutely fucking dominant. Sold incredibly well. It provided a ton of competition to Madden. And then EA was like, fuck this. We're buying out the exclusivity license for future, NFL simulation football games. And I mean, at this point, it's been over a decade where EA has their thing with the football games and 2K has their thing with the basketball games. And I don't know. I feel like as soon as EA revives that college basketball series, it's like, wait, you're coming into our market? All right, bitch. We're coming into your market. All right, the final one up on the board is for old Remedy. I think they're going to create a dream Star Wars video game. And I think this will be the game that really is a breakthrough for Remedy. They struggle, man. They struggle to turn a profit on those games. They struggle to sell copies of their games. As great as they are, they just don't typically sell all that well, which is such a fucking bummer. But I think it'll come out, it'll be universally praised across the board. Like the by far the highest rated Remedy game of all time, one of the highest rated Star Wars games of all time. I think it'll be like right under Knights of the Old Republic. And I think you'll commonly hear terms like it's redefining what Star Wars can be. I think it'll be much more horror tinged than most Star Wars properties. I think you'll probably be dealing with some really dark ass themes, which thankfully Andor has already began broaching those topics and diving into that realm. So I think that'll open up the door a lot more for Remedy to be like, yeah, we're dealing with cults and brainwashing and all sorts of really, really dark shit. And yeah, I think this will finally provide Remedy with some financial freedom, some financial security that will allow that studio to prosper for hopefully decades to come after that. So final prediction, end on a good note. There's a lot of negativity in here, a lot of negative shit you can predict about the future of games, but I think Remedy, the creativity will find a way. And being excellent for so long, but being the critical darling and not being the commercial smash hit factory, I think they will at least have one of those games. And I think it will be a Star Wars game, especially when you look at Control and you're like, yeah, well, that's one of the best Jedi games of all time. So can we take those mechanics and make our own Jedi game? Can we be playing as somebody who has Jedi powers and they don't know it, and they're being brainwashed by this cult, but I don't fucking know. They got like a little sister that's taken, or a mother or father, and then the cult it captures them and takes them away, and then you start having your fucking superhero force powers, your rage hits, and you go on a rampage killing a bunch of cult members, and you're like, how am I doing this? How am I able to kill all these cult members? And why am I levitating? And why are my eyes turning red? I don't know. Is that something that I don't fucking know. Did Jedis have red eyes, or is that... Why is my hair glowing yellow and turning spiky? Coming in 2034, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Goku's Revenge. Let me know your predictions down below in the comments. Let them fly. The next 10 years of gaming, what is it going to look like? Let me know, and I shall see you very, very soon. Take it easy, my good people. Subscribe, like, comment, share, all that good shit if you feel so inclined. It greatly helps out the channel. And yeah, be back very, very soon. Take it easy, guys. Goodbye.